in the House is Scott Peyton, State Director of Right on Crime. Good morning, Scott. How are you, sir? It's good to have you.
Good morning, Paul.
I was just thinking about this a few seconds ago. It's kind of sad to even need an organization like this for victims' rights when you start thinking about it. But that's something that really came up, 10, 15 years ago that we had to address in the state legislature. A little bit of a history on that.
Yeah, Paul, it is unfortunate that we do have to make sure that we are putting victims' rights front and center when it comes to legislation, when it comes to policy. Unfortunately, we have way too many victims in Mississippi and across the country, and that's what we intended this session was to remind lawmakers, to remind ourselves. I need to be reminded that the work that we're doing ultimately should be with the goal of helping and restoring victims and walking them through the process and making sure they understand what's going on in the criminal justice process.
Is that an ongoing thing, Scott, as far as people calling you saying, look, because I'm thinking of the last thing here is this parole situation that we're talking about now, as far as the last one with the Williams guy. And is that part of it as far as the paroling in that subject?
Yeah, Paul. This session we had some great representatives and senators that ran this resolution. It was Representative Felcher, Senator Delano, England, Kaufman, and Seymour. This week is National Crime Victims' Rights Week. And what we did was pointed out that the Constitution, Mississippi Constitution, says that victims should be treated with fairness, with dignity, with respect, and most importantly, and I think this will tie into what you mentioned on the recent parole decision, they need to be informed, they need to be present, and they need to be heard throughout the process. And, we ran this through, as I said earlier, to make sure that lawmakers understand they have a duty to make sure that victims are treated with fairness and dignity and respect, and that legislation and policy that comes from under the dome keeps that in mind, and that we pass policies and legislation that is going to reduce crime, reduce recidivism, which in turn creates fewer victims. But we do have victims in the system now that need to be given the opportunity to understand the system and to be able to navigate through the complexities of the criminal justice process.
So what you're basically saying is through your organization pushing it through the legislative process where victims' rights is more than just a gratuity, it is the law of the land.
Absolutely, Paul. And we've heard a lot of people mention about prayer and that we need to do more than prayer, and we do. Part of this resolution, though, declares Friday as a day of prayer in Mississippi for crime victims. And we used a scripture from the Old Testament, and I'll put on my deacon hat for you, Paul. But King Hezekiah was told by the prophet Isaiah that he was going to die in 15 days, which obviously caused him a lot of harm and distress. He prayed to God that this would not happen. God heard his prayer. He saw his tears, and now he's healing him. And that is the theme that we set for Friday. While victims should be in our prayers every day, this particular Friday we'll designate through these resolutions a day of prayer. And what comes with prayer comes with action. We have to put the things that we're working towards into action, and so we do set aside for prayer because there is value in prayer. Prayer is very powerful.
Absolutely.
And it's how we should begin and start our day, and how we should begin and start the activities that we do. So,
Scott, I want to take this from a lot of the words there to how someone out there who has been a victim of a crime, and they're listening to this, he is or she is, and she says, "Oh, well, wait a minute, tell me exactly what powers do I have through legislation or through your organization? What can I do about this if I feel like I am being mistreated here or being negated as far as some of the decisions?"
Well, Paul, there is a Crime Victims Bill of Rights, and if you're just getting into, if you're new to if you've just been a victim of a crime, the best place to start is with the district attorney, with your prosecutor's office. Each prosecutor's office, if they do not have an established victims coordinator, they will be able to point you in a direction to a victims coordinator that will start to explain the criminal justice system, let you understand what the upcoming hearings are going to be about, and explain the whole process. As someone that has been in the process, my family was a victim of a sex crime, and it was difficult navigating it, one, because of the emotions that were going on, and understanding we would get letters in the mail, Paul, when things were going good, when we finally were getting to a point that we were able to not think about it. We would open the mailbox, and then there would be a notice of a new hearing, or an appeal, or a parole hearing. These things, and victims need someone to call to explain and walk them through the process and let them know what they can do and let them know what these hearings are all about.
All right. What happens if you're in the city of Jackson, you get carjacked or an attempted carjacked, you are emotionally traumatized, your property has been damaged, maybe they've stolen your purse or whatever it happens to be. You thank God that you got away with your life, but as many times as you call the Jackson Police Department or the city council, whatever, you're getting no feedback at all. What about your rights there? What do you do then?
Paul, I would. There are many nonprofits, and we can put some links on our website. But there's many nonprofits that.
What do the nonprofits do?
Well, they will line you up with counseling. There's so much trauma associated with being victims, and not necessarily just for the individual that was the target of the crime, but family members. There's a ripple effect when it comes to crime. There's a ripple effect on.
I understand that when they line you up with counsel, does that mean they find you a lawyer?
No, I'm counseling, Paul.
You talking about therapy?
Yes.
Is that paid for, or who pays for that?
It really depends, but there are some opportunities out there. And I would start with the prosecutor's office when it comes to those getting those referrals for those in the community that are providing these services.
You go back and you look at some of the success stories that your organization has done. I mean, can you point to that and say, all right, we're getting to where we want to be?
Well, yes. When we look at working with the legislature to understand that those individuals, and we'll talk post-conviction, those individuals that are being sent to prison have to be prepared because eventually they're going to come out. So what we are making sure that while individuals are inside of DOC, while they're in DOC custody, that they are receiving programming, they are being prepared for the day that they ultimately come out. And these are ways that we can help protect victims by reducing recidivism and making sure that we're addressing the underlying causes of what got people into prison in the first place.
Do you counsel with them from your organization, or is that all outsourced?
That would be all outsourced, Paul. We don't do any direct services, but we would make sure that there's policies in place or could point them in the right direction.
It's just, yesterday we had Flip Weinberg on, and Flip did a great job. He's the assistant prosecutor for the ADA for the city of Jackson back when this Williams guy was convicted. And he said more than once, and I was talking to him, he said there was something, so you looked into this guy's eyes, and it was just psychotic. I mean, it was, this guy just, he was not even there. He was some wildness in his eyes. And he's being released into the community. And I keep thinking about what Flip said about this, and I'm not sure if he's changed or what, but there's got to be a lot of people in that community, the crime victims and the family and friends, who are worried about where this guy's going to be. So, I mean, that's a whole new story. I want you to comment on that when we come back in a moment or two with Scott Peyton. If you're looking for more information on this, it is on Twitter at Right On. Alrighty, on a hump day, Scott Peyton joins us. Just people were asking, that lawsuit filed Monday of this week against country music star Morgan Wallen was withdrawn. It looks like a change of strategy. Yesterday morning in federal court, the first lawsuit against Wallen had been withdrawn. More people are coming forward to sue the country music superstar, class action suit, et cetera, et cetera. And that is where that stands. We'll have an update for you a little bit later on. I want to get back to this because we were talking to Scott about this. Certainly, I think this would be the real identity of a crime victim when you think that person's going to be back into your neighborhood. What does your organization do to put some weight behind the seriousness of this to make, first of all, sure that this guy has been rehabilitated?
Great question, Paul. And let's kind of step back a little bit on this parole decision of Williams. Been following it closely in the news, and anything I say is going to be based solely on what I've read and heard. I do not have the facts in front of me as far as what the parole board saw or considered, but he is eligible for parole because of the 5 Supreme Court decisions regarding juvenile lifers without parole. So this is not a policy coming from under the dome. Our legislature did not vote on
I understand
this particular part.
But it's also not mandatory mandatory parole, so
absolutely,
regardless of what the Supreme Court said.
Absolutely, and that brings to a point of what we advocate for is that each case needs to be looked at individually. The parole board should have all the facts in front of them from what efforts they did to rehabilitate, what is the community's thoughts on this individual coming out, the prosecutor, the sentencing judge, all the players in the criminal justice system should have some input in this parole board decision. And what we look at here, from what I've read, the family was not notified, is what they're saying. And if that is the case, Paul, that is so disturbing and so disappointing because, our resolution predates this, but it is so important because this family was not informed, they were not present, they did not have an opportunity to voice or to even hear what was going on in that parole board hearing and be able to let the board know their thoughts on this individual coming back into the community. To address your initial question, though, what Right on Crime works with the legislature to do is to make sure that when individuals like this, when the parole board says that they're ready to come out, which we know that is not 100% certainty that this person has been rehabilitated, but hopefully everything has been done to ensure that they are, and then when they are released, they'll be on parole supervision through the community supervision side of MDOC. But we need to make sure, again, going back to reentry, going back to programming, that the time spent inside a prison is productive time, and that they are given the tools to be prepared to come out into the community and be successful and to turn away from the life of crime that got them in there. This situation with the Williams family, Paul, is not your typical parolee situation. When I look at it and read the details of this horrific crime, that's why it's so important. We can't say that every 17-year-old that committed a crime should never be released, nor should we say that every 17-year-old that committed a crime should be released. You made a great point that the Supreme Court simply said they need to be, available for a parole board hearing.
I look at this and say, well, your organization is you got to be on the front row seat of this for crime victims, and it just seems to me logically in this case, in the previous case that we had of Mr. Bell, or any cases before or that might come up, it would seem it's a responsibility of the parole board in some way to call a community meeting with the family and friends, or at least meet with them and say, here on paper is why we do not think he is going to be a threat to you or the community when he is released back, if he's going there. I mean, if he's going to move to Kalamazoo, then that's a different story, but still he could return back home. But I think they have a responsibility as far as crime victims to come in and at least meet with the people who are the most affected and say, here's what we've done or here's what he's done to deserve this. And I would think that your organization would be one of the front runners on making that happen.
Absolutely, Paul. I mean, that's what I mean, and those things are in place, and that's why I said I don't have.
Well, have they done them in this case?
That we don't know 100% certainty because we
Well,
don't
I mean,
have
he's going to
those,
be released, what, in a few days?
right, but we don't have the facts of what the parole board did or didn't do. We do know what the family says, and I have no reason to believe that the family would not have attended this based on what they've said, where they've attended every hearing that he's had prior.
Are you guys given any notification at all as far as your organization when somebody's going to be released?
No, Paul, we do not. We're not part of the parole board or MDOC. Though
I understand that. You're a nonprofit organization.
Yes, sir. Though we do work closely because we don't want these situations to happen, and that victims often are left in the dark, even though it's
I understand. Where do you get your funding?
Well, a variety of we don't get any federal or we don't get any state funding, so it would be private donors.
Just donors, contributions.
Yes, Paul.
Yeah.
And the ultimate goal of Right on Crime is public safety, and we have to look at it through we want to stop crime, we want to restore victims, which is critical. Because victims are the ones going through this. They are the ones that will, whether it is a simple burglary or a murder, victims are traumatized from what happened to them, and we need to make sure that their voices are
Scott,
heard.
has anybody met with a family, with Zeno or any of the Mangums from your organization?
No, sir, we have not.
Have they reached out to you guys?
They have not reached out to us.
All right. Final thoughts, sir.
Well, Paul, I think when it comes to the parole board, that is a difficult job to have. They have to, one, look at the horrendous offenses that come before them. They have to ensure that someone has been rehabilitated, which is a very difficult thing. I do believe that people can be rehabilitated. In these cases with Williams, I have no idea if he's rehabilitated because I don't have the facts in front of me. But I think the family definitely should have been notified if they were not, and they should have their voices heard before that parole board, before this individual would be released back into the community.
You look at these, you talk about put your deacon hat on, and this other front story here that's just in the craw of a lot of people this morning. A man who escaped from the Mississippi jail over the weekend is suspected of killing a man and stealing his pickup truck. This happened yesterday in Jackson. Anthony Watts, 61 years old. I understand was he a pastor, or I'm not sure. So Anthony is 61 years old. He was shot and killed Monday night about 7 o'clock on Interstate 55. He pulled over to help a guy who he wrecked his motorcycle. Police said that the man shot Watts several times and then stole his red Dodge Ram pickup truck. Mr. Watts died at the scene from his Good Samaritan act. Based on information gathered from investigators, the suspect fit the description of 22-year-old Dylan Arrington, one of the escapees. Arrington is one of 4 prisoners. None of them have been caught as of a few minutes ago that I know of. Along with Casey Grayson, Corey Harrison, Jerry Raines, who escaped Saturday night from the Raymond Detention Center, a facility near Jackson. They thought maybe that they had spent the night on the roof and then escaped the next day. Hinds County Sheriff Tyree Jones said the man might have camped out on the roof before fleeing the facility and going their separate ways. But a tragedy ending on one of these yesterday or a day before yesterday. Sir, we thank you for coming in. I appreciate it very much. If you want more information, go to Right on Crime, or what's on the website? Is it the same thing on the website?
It is, yes, sir. It's www.rightoncrime.com.
You got it. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.